You are my sweetheart. Let's go in the room.
They say that intuition is a woman's superpower, a quiet, primal alarm bell that rings when the subconscious notices what the conscious mind refuses to see. But for 2 years, I treated my intuition like a defect, a malfunction in my brain that needed to be medicated, therapied, and apologized away. I spent 24 months swallowing bile every time my husband David hugged his younger sister Chloe a little too tightly or lingered a little too long when kissing her cheek, convincing myself that I was the one with the problem, that I was the broken, jealous shrew who couldn't understand the sacred bond of family because I was an only child who grew up lonely. I let them gaslight me into believing that their lack of boundaries was just how they were raised, that their late-night whispers were just siblings grieving their lost parents, and that my discomfort was a symptom of my own insecurity. I cooked for her. I cleaned up after her. I even lent her money that I never saw again, all while thinking I was being a supportive sister-in-law, a good wife, a part of the family. I didn't know that I wasn't the wife. I was the ATM, the cover story, and the third wheel in my own marriage. I didn't know that the woman sleeping in the guest room wasn't sharing David's DNA. She was sharing his history, his secrets, and as I would eventually find out in the most horrific way possible, his bed. This is the story of how I welcomed a viper into my home, fed it from my own plate, and didn't realize I had been bitten until the poison was already stopping my heart. To understand how I fell for such a monstrous lie, you have to understand the man who told it. David wasn't just charming, he was a mirror, reflecting exactly what you wanted to see. A chameleon who morphed into your perfect partner before you even realized what you were looking for. We met at a gallery opening in Chicago, a cliché setting for a romance that felt anything but, where he stood in front of a jagged, abstract painting and made a joke about how it looked like his bank account, disarming me instantly. He was handsome in that rugged, approachable way, dark curls, eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a laugh that felt like a warm blanket on a cold day. He told me he was an investment banker who traveled frequently for high-stakes mergers, a job description vague enough to be impressive, but specific enough to explain his erratic schedule. We fell in love with the velocity of a crashing plane. Within 3 months we were exclusive. Within 6 we were living together. And within a year, we were married in a small, intimate ceremony at the courthouse because he claimed he had no family left except for an estranged sister he rarely spoke to. "It's just us, Amara," he had whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear as we signed the papers. "You're my family now. The rest of the world doesn't matter." I believed him because I wanted to, because I was 34, and tired of the dating games, tired of the ghosting, and desperate for the kind of all-consuming love he offered on a silver platter. I didn't question why we never met his childhood friends, or why his digital footprint was surprisingly small. I just thanked the universe for finally sending me a man who wanted to build a life with me. The first 6 months of our marriage were blissful, a haze of domestic happiness where we painted walls, bought furniture, and talked about baby names. But the cracks started to appear with the arrival of the sister. It was a Tuesday evening in November, raining sleet against the windows, when David came home looking ashen, his usual confidence replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. He sat me down on the sofa, holding my hand so tight his knuckles were white, and told me that his sister, Chloe, had reached out. "She's in trouble, Amara," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "She just got out of a horrible, abusive relationship. She has nowhere to go. She's broke, terrified, and she's the only blood I have left. I can't leave her on the street." My heart broke for him, for her. I was a feminist, a woman who believed in supporting other women, and the thought of his little sister suffering was unbearable. "Of course she can stay," I said immediately, sealing my fate. "Bring her here. We have the guest room. She can stay as long as she needs." David hugged me then, burying his face in my neck, and I felt a tear wet my skin. "You're an angel," he whispered. "I don't deserve you." He was right. He didn't. Chloe arrived 2 days later, and she was nothing like I expected. I had pictured a waif, a broken bird needing soup and blankets, someone I could nurture back to health. Instead, walked in a woman who looked like she had stepped off a runway, tall, curvaceous, with piercing green eyes, and a confidence that sucked the air out of the room. She didn't look broken. She looked predatory. She dropped her expensive-looking leather bags in my hallway, looked me up and down with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "So, you're the wife. David said you were cute." The word hung in the air, patronizing and dismissive, but before I could process the slight, David was there, sweeping her into a hug that lasted 10 seconds too long. He lifted her off her feet, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in. "I missed you, Chloe," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. She wrapped her legs around his waist for a split second before dropping down, laughing a throaty, intimate laugh. "Missed you too, Davy." I stood there, holding a welcome casserole dish, feeling a sudden, sharp chill that had nothing to do with the open door. I told myself I was being ridiculous. They're siblings, I thought. They haven't seen each other in years. This is relief. This is love. I forced a smile and welcomed her to our home. The invasion was subtle at first. A slow erosion of boundaries that I didn't notice until the water was already at my chin. Chloe didn't act like a guest. She acted like the lady of the manor. She would wake up at noon and lounge around the living room in silk robes that were far too short, sitting with her legs draped over David's lap while he tried to work on his laptop. When I walked in, they wouldn't separate. They would just look up, unflinching, as if I were the intruder. She took over the kitchen, cooking dishes that David loved, but I had never mastered: spicy stews, complex roasts, and she would serve him first, making a show of fixing his plate. "Davy doesn't like peas, Amara," she would say, picking them out of the pasta I made. "He's allergic to texture. You should know that." I would feel a flush of shame, wondering how I didn't know these small details about my own husband, while she preened with the superiority of someone who held the manual to his heart. When I tried to bring it up to David, late at night in the safety of our bedroom, he would sigh, the heavy, disappointed sigh of a martyr. "Amara, please," he would say, turning away from me. "She's traumatized. She needs physical comfort. We grew up in a house where we only had each other. We didn't have parents who hugged us. Don't make this weird. You're sexualizing an innocent sibling bond, and frankly, it says more about your mind than ours." He made me feel dirty for noticing. He made me feel perverse. So I stopped asking. I swallowed the unease and started taking extra shifts at work just to avoid seeing them cuddle on the love seat watching movies I wasn't invited to join. But the weirdness escalated. It wasn't just the touching, it was the history. They had a language I couldn't speak, a shorthand of glances and half-finished sentences that excluded me completely. They would burst into laughter at the dinner table over a joke I didn't understand. And when I asked, Chloe would wave her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's an old thing from back home. You wouldn't get it." I felt like a ghost in my own dining room, watching a life that didn't include me. Then there were the business trips. David's travel schedule ramped up about a month after Chloe arrived. He would leave for 3 or 4 days to New York or Miami. Coincidentally, Chloe would often vanish for a day or two as well, claiming she was staying with a friend from college or going to a job interview in the city. I never connected the dots. Why would I? Who suspects their husband is taking his sister on a romantic getaway? The mind protects itself from trauma it cannot handle, and my mind refused to go there. I just thought she was flaky and he was busy. I was the dutiful wife, keeping the home fires burning while they burned me at the stake. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point if I hadn't been so blinded by manipulation, came on my birthday. I had planned a small dinner party, just a few friends and us. I spent all day decorating, buying David's favorite wine, hoping for a romantic evening where I could reclaim my husband. Chloe was supposed to be out with friends. But an hour before the guests arrived, she came downstairs wearing a dress that was breathtaking. Emerald green, backless, hugging every curve. It was stunning. It was also the exact same color as the dress I was wearing. "Oh!" she exclaimed, feigning surprise. "We match! How funny!" She walked over to David, who was fixing a tie in the mirror. "Here, let me," she said, batting his hands away. She stood chest to chest with him, fixing the knot with practiced ease, then smoothed her hands down his lapels, lingering on his chest. "You look handsome, Davy," she purred. David looked at her, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw it. I saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't brotherly affection. It was raw, hungry desire. He looked at her like a starving man looks at a feast. Then he saw me watching in the reflection of the mirror, and the mask slammed back into place. "Thanks, Chloe," he said, stepping back quickly. "You look great too. Doesn't she look great, Amara?" I nodded, feeling like I was going to vomit. That night, at the party, Chloe charmed everyone. She told stories. She laughed loudly. She touched David's arm every time she made a point. My friends whispered to me, "Your sister-in-law is very close to him, isn't she?" I laughed it off, defending them, repeating the script David had programmed into me. They had a hard childhood. They're just close. I was the pathetic spokesperson for my own humiliation. 3 months into her stay, the atmosphere in the house shifted from uncomfortable to hostile. Chloe stopped pretending to be grateful. She started criticizing my house, my job, my body. "You look tired, Amara," she would say over breakfast, biting into toast I had bought. "Maybe you should hit the gym. David likes fit women." Or, "This house is so suburban. I don't know how David stands it. He always talked about living in a penthouse." It was a constant drip feed of poison designed to lower my self-esteem, to make me feel lucky that David was even with me. And David. He became distant. The sex stopped. The conversation stopped. He was always tired, always stressed. But I would hear him laughing in the guest room with Chloe at 1 a.m. One night, I tried to enter the guest room to ask them to keep it down, but the door was locked. I knocked. "Guys, it's late." There was a scramble, a heavy thud, and then David opened the door, shirtless, sweating, looking flustered. "We were just doing yoga," he stammered. Chloe was showing me a stretch for my back. I looked past him. Chloe was in bed, under the covers, reading a magazine, looking bored. "Go to sleep, Amara," she called out. "Stop hovering." I stood there, looking at my shirtless husband and his sister in bed, and my brain screamed, incest. It screamed, wrong. But David grabbed my shoulders, steering me into the hallway. "Stop it," he hissed. "Stop looking at us like that. You're sick. You're obsessed. It's yoga." I went to our room and cried myself to sleep, thinking I was married to a pervert, thinking my life was a horror movie of forbidden taboos. I didn't know the taboo was a lie. I didn't know the horror was much simpler and much more common. The unraveling of the lie began with a leak. Not a metaphorical one, but a literal water leak in the attic. It was a Saturday, and David and Chloe had gone out for brunch. They didn't invite me. A heavy storm had passed through the night before, and I noticed a water stain spreading on the ceiling of the hallway. I called a roofer, but he couldn't come until Monday, so I dragged the ladder down and climbed up into the attic to put a bucket under the drip. The attic was dusty, filled with old holiday decorations and boxes David had brought when he moved in. Boxes, he told me, were just boring tax papers and old files that I shouldn't bother with. I navigated through the insulation, found the leak, and placed the bucket. As I turned to leave, my foot caught on a heavy cardboard box pushed deep into the corner, hidden behind a stack of old suitcases. The box tipped over, spilling its contents onto the floor beams. I sighed, annoyed, and knelt to clean it up. I expected to see invoices or tax returns. Instead, I saw photo albums, dozens of them, and loose photographs, hundreds of them. I picked one up. It was a picture of David, younger, maybe 5 years ago. He was on a beach, tanned and smiling. His arm was around a woman, Chloe. But she wasn't his sister in this photo. She was wearing a bikini, straddling him in the sand, kissing him deeply on the mouth. My breath hitched. I dropped the photo as if it burned me. Incest, my mind whispered again. He has photos of his incestuous relationship. I reached for another photo. This one was formal. David in a tuxedo, Chloe in a white dress, a wedding dress. They were standing at an altar, but it wasn't a play. It wasn't a costume party. It was a wedding. My hand started shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper. I grabbed a thick leather-bound album and opened it. The Wedding of David and Lisa, June 12, 2015. Lisa? Who was Lisa? I looked at the photos. It was Chloe. Chloe was Lisa. Lisa was Chloe. I flipped through the pages frantically. Photos of them cutting the cake. Photos of them dancing. Photos of them holding a baby. A baby. There was a child. A little boy with David's eyes and Chloe's nose. I scrambled through the pile of spilled debris and found a manila envelope. Inside were birth certificates. Noah James, born 2018, father David James, mother Lisa James. And then, the marriage certificate. David James and Lisa Miller, married 2015. There was no divorce decree. There were no annulment papers, just tax returns filed jointly. Last year, the year we were married, the world tilted on its axis. The air in the attic grew thin. I sat back on my heels, gasping for air, the dust clogging my throat. They weren't brother and sister. They were husband and wife. They had been married for years. They had a child somewhere. And I wasn't the wife. I was the second wife. The illegal wife. The dupe. Everything rushed back to me in a sickening montage. The lack of boundaries. The touching. The locked door. The yoga. It wasn't incest. It was just a married couple carrying on their relationship right under the nose of the idiot woman paying their bills. The sister story was the perfect cover. It explained why they were close, why they had the same last name, if she used her maiden name or if he claimed it was family name, why she was in his life. It was genius. It was evil. I looked at the dates on the financial documents scattered on the floor. Bank transfers, large ones. Moving money from our joint account, the account I contributed 80% to because David's mergers were often commission-based, into an account under L. James. I had been funding them. I had been paying for his real wife's clothes, her dinners, probably the child's tuition. I was the cash cow they were milking dry before they moved on. I heard the front door open downstairs. Their voices floated up, carefree and laughing. God, she's so gullible. Chloe, no. Lisa was saying, her voice echoing in the stairwell. Did you see her face when I said the house was suburban? She looked like she was going to cry. Don't push it, babe, David's voice replied. We need a few more months. The bonus hits in March. Then we can clear out the accounts and head back to Costa Rica. I miss Noah, she whined. My mom says he's asking for us. Soon, David promised. Just keep playing the sister act. You're doing great. Give me a kiss. Silence. The sound of wet, open-mouthed kissing in my hallway. I sat in the dark, dusty attic, holding the picture of their wedding day, and I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a clean break. It was a jagged, violent fracture. The Amara who cooked casseroles and apologized for being jealous died in that attic. The woman who came down the ladder 10 minutes later was someone else entirely. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I didn't run down waving the marriage certificate. That would be too easy. That would give them a chance to run, to hide the money, to disappear back to Costa Rica or wherever they had stashed their child. No. I carefully put the photos back in the box. I put the box back exactly where I found it. I wiped my fingerprints off the dust. I climbed down the ladder, put it away, and walked into the bathroom to wash the attic grime off my face. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were dead, but my smile was razor sharp. I walked into the kitchen where they were unpacking takeout. David jumped slightly when he saw me, guilt flashing in his eyes before he smoothed it over. "Hey, we brought you sushi." "Thanks," I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing of the nuclear winter inside my heart. "How was brunch?" "Oh, you know," Lisa said, popping a piece of ginger into her mouth. "Just sibling stuff. Boring." "That's nice," I said, opening a bottle of wine. I poured 3 glasses. "I actually have some news too. I was looking at our finances, David, and I think we have enough to plan a big trip. Maybe a family reunion? I'd love to meet the rest of the family, since I've gotten so close to Chloe." I watched them exchange a panicked look. I took a sip of wine. The game had changed. They thought they were the predators playing with a mouse. They didn't realize they had just trapped themselves in a cage with a tiger, and I wasn't going to just bite. I was going to eat them alive. Living with a murderer is terrifying, but living with 2 actors who think they are directing your life is a strange, nauseating form of power. The morning after I found the marriage certificate in the attic, I woke up with a clarity that felt almost chemical, a cold, sharp focus that replaced the fog of confusion I had lived in for 2 years. I lay in bed listening to David breathing beside me, the man I had vowed to love and cherish. And I didn't feel love. I didn't feel hate. I felt the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor that needed to be excised. He rolled over, his hand draping over my hip, and I didn't flinch. I let him touch me because that was part of the role I had to play. The role of the oblivious, doting cash cow who was still too stupid to see the knife held to her throat. I got up, showered, and went downstairs to make coffee. The smell of roasted beans mingling with the lingering scent of Chloe's perfume. A heavy, musky floral that I now recognized not as a sister's scent, but as a wife's territory marker. When she walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later, wearing one of David's old t-shirts that barely covered her thighs, stretching like a cat in the sunlight, I didn't look away in discomfort like I usually did. I looked right at her, staring at the ring finger on her left hand, noticing for the first time the faint indentation where a wedding band used to sit. A ghost of the ring she probably kept hidden in that locked jewelry box on her dresser. "Morning, sleepyhead," she drawled, pouring herself a cup of my coffee in my mug. "You were up late last night. I heard you pacing." I smiled, turning from the stove where I was scrambling eggs. "Just thinking," I said, my voice light and airy. "I was looking at real estate in Costa Rica online. David mentioned he always wanted to go. It looks beautiful. Do you think he'd like it?" The reaction was microscopic, but it was there. A tightening of her jaw, a flicker of panic in her green eyes before she masked it with a yawn. "Costa Rica?" she asked, feigning indifference. "I don't know. David hates humidity. He's more of a mountain guy." She was lying. I knew she was lying because I had heard them planning their escape there just 12 hours ago. I hummed, plating the eggs. "Funny, I could have sworn he mentioned it. Maybe I'll book us a surprise trip there for the spring, just the 3 of us." I set the plate in front of her. "Eat up, you need your strength." I watched her eat the eggs I cooked, thinking about how easy it would be to crush up the sleeping pills in the cabinet and sprinkle them over her toast. But that was too messy, too quick. I didn't want them asleep. I wanted them wide awake when their world collapsed. The first phase of my plan was intelligence gathering. I needed to know exactly where the money was, where the child was, and how deep the fraud went. I waited until David left for work, which I now assumed was just him going to a rented office space to play video games or meet with travel agents. And Chloe left for her yoga class. I called in sick to work, something I never did, and turned my house into a crime scene investigation. I didn't just look in the attic this time. I tore apart the guest room. I found the key to her jewelry box taped to the underside of her nightstand drawer. Inside, Nestled in velvet was the ring, a diamond solitaire, and engraved on the inside band, D and L, forever. I took a picture. I went through her laptop, which was foolishly password protected with the digits of her son's birthday, a date I had memorized from the birth certificate in the attic. The laptop was a treasure trove. Emails to realtors in San Jose, confirmation of wire transfers to an offshore account in the Caymans, and photos. Thousands of photos of their life together while I was at work. Photos of them in my bed when I was on business trips. Photos of them mocking my decorating choices. And videos of Noah, their son. Watching the videos of the child was the hardest part. He was an innocent victim in this, a little boy with curly hair and a confused smile, asking, "When are mommy and daddy coming back?" In one video, filmed in what looked like a cramped apartment, Lisa, I refuse to call her Chloe in my head anymore, was holding the camera. "Soon, baby," she cooed. "Daddy is finishing up a big job with the cow. Once the cow pays out, we're coming to get you." The cow. That was me. I was the cow. I sat in the guest room chair, the one I had bought specifically for her comfort, and watched the video on loop, letting the insult sear itself into my brain. The cow. Fine. If I was a cow, I was going to be the one that kicked the lantern over and burned the whole barn down. I noted the background of the video, a floral wallpaper, a specific view of a water tower out the window. I paused the video, zoomed in on a piece of mail on the counter behind the child. 142 Oak Street, Gary, Indiana. That was where they were keeping him. Probably with her mother. I had a location. Now, I needed a lawyer. I didn't go to a local attorney. I drove 2 hours to Chicago to a shark named Eleanor Vance, a woman known for destroying unfaithful husbands in courtrooms with the precision of a tactical nuke. I sat in her glass-walled office, laid the photos, the birth certificates, and the financial records on her mahogany desk, and watched her eyebrows climb toward her hairline. "This isn't just divorce, honey," Eleanor said, lighting a cigarette despite the building codes. "This is bigamy. This is fraud. This is grand larceny. We can put them in prison for 20 years. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "But here's the problem. If we file now, they run. They have offshore accounts. They'll disappear, and you'll be left with a debt and a hollow victory. We need to freeze them. We need to make them think the pot is getting sweeter, so they stay until we can drop the hammer." She outlined a plan that was devious and brilliant. I needed to liquidate my own assets quietly, moving them to a protected trust they couldn't touch, while simultaneously making it look like I was coming into a windfall. I needed to dangle a carrot so big they wouldn't be able to resist waiting for it. I went home that night and put on the performance of a lifetime. I bought champagne. I ordered lobster. When David came home, I met him at the door with a kiss that surprised him. "What's the occasion?" he asked, eyeing the bottle. "Did you get a promotion?" "Better," I said, leading him and Lisa to the living room. "I got a call from my aunt's executor today. You remember Aunt Clara? The one who owned the land in Montana?" I paused for effect. "She passed away last week. I didn't tell you because we weren't close, but apparently she left me everything. The land was just sold to a developer." I took a sip of champagne, watching their eyes dilate. Greed is a physical reaction. You can see it in the pupil, in the slight parting of the lips. "How much?" Lisa asked, her voice breathless, forgetting to act like a disinterested sister. "After taxes." I smiled. $2 million. It hits the joint account in 30 days. The silence in the room was electric. I could practically hear them recalculating their escape plan. 30 days. They couldn't leave for Costa Rica next week like they planned. They had to stay. They had to wait for the $2 million. "Oh my God, Amara!" David shouted, picking me up and spinning me around. "That's amazing! We're rich!" "We are," I agreed, hugging him back, feeling his heart pounding against my chest. "Not with love, but with the adrenaline of a con man who just hit the jackpot. "But there's a catch," I said, pulling back. "To release the funds, I have to sign some papers in person with the executor, and I want us to celebrate. I was thinking, since we have this money coming, why don't we take that family trip, but not Costa Rica? Let's go to the lake house. My family's old cabin. It's remote, it's quiet, and we can just be us." The lake house was a lie. It was a rental I had booked on the drive home, a secluded cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, miles from civilization, with spotty cell service and one road in, one road out. It was a trap. "The lake house sounds perfect," Lisa said, smiling at me. "A real family bonding trip." "Exactly," I said. "Family." The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. While they played the role of the excited family, I was systematically dismantling their safety net. I worked with Eleanor to quietly sever my ties to the joint account, setting up a dummy mirror account that showed the pending $2 million transfer, so David would see it when he logged in. I installed a keylogger on David's computer and intercepted an email to his travel agent, canceling their flights to San Jose. Postponing the trip for a month, came into some funds, we'll rebook first class. I printed it out and added it to my evidence file. I also tracked down the mother in Gary, Indiana. I needed to confirm the child was safe before I executed the final move. I took a day off, told David I was going to the spa, and drove to the address on the envelope. It was a rundown bungalow with peeling paint and a tricycle in the yard. I sat in my car across the street wearing sunglasses and a hat and waited. Around noon, an older woman came out, holding the hand of a small boy, Noah. He looked exactly like David. Seeing him in the flesh, a real, breathing child who was being used as a pawn, broke my heart. He wasn't a concept anymore. He was a victim. I took photos with a long-lens camera for the police report. I wasn't going to leave him there. When the police raided the cabin, Child Protective Services would be raiding this house simultaneously. But the hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was the psychological warfare. I started leaving breadcrumbs to mess with their heads. One morning, I left a brochure for a divorce lawyer on the kitchen counter just sitting there. When David found it, he turned pale. "Amara, what is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. I laughed, feigning ignorance. "Oh, that's for my friend, Sarah. Her husband is cheating on her with her sister. Can you imagine? Some people are so sick." I watched the color drain from his face. I watched Lisa drop her fork. "Wow," she choked out. "That's terrible." "I know," I said, sipping my tea. "She found out because she found a second phone. Cheaters always get sloppy, don't they?" I stared right at David. He looked like he was going to pass out. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching them squirm, watching the paranoia set in. They started whispering more, checking their phones constantly, wondering if I knew. But the greed for the $2 million kept them anchored. They convinced themselves I was just gossiping. They couldn't walk away from the payday. 3 days before the trip, I initiated the financial kill switch. I went to the bank and withdrew $50,000 in cash, the maximum I could get without triggering a federal review that would freeze everything immediately. I told the teller it was for a contractor. I put the cash in a duffel bag and hid it in the trunk of my car. Then I transferred the remaining balance of our legitimate savings, about $150,000, into the trust Eleanor had set up. The joint account was now effectively empty, save for the fake digital overlay the bank's fraud department, who Eleanor had contacted, had helped simulate for David's login view. Realistically, if he tried to swipe his card for a pack of gum, it would decline. I had to time this perfectly. We had to be at the cabin before he realized the money was gone. The morning of the trip, the tension in the car was palpable. I insisted on driving. David sat in the passenger seat, scrolling nervously on his phone, checking the fake balance over and over. Lisa sat in the back, painting her nails, trying to look bored but failing. "So," Lisa said as we hit the highway, leaving the city behind, "what's the plan for the money, Amara? Are you going to invest it?" "I was thinking of buying a boat," I lied. Or maybe paying off the mortgage. Or maybe I'll give it to charity. I haven't decided. Charity? David snapped, his head whipping around. Why would you do that? It's good karma, isn't it? I said, glancing at him. You get what you give. I believe that. He fell silent, biting his lip. We drove north, the landscape changing from suburban sprawl to dense, dark forests. The signal bars on our phones dropped one by one. By the time we turned onto the gravel road leading to the cabin, we had no service. It's really remote, Lisa muttered, looking out the window at the towering pines. Is there Wi-Fi? No, I said cheerfully. Total disconnection, just us and the truth. The truth? David asked, frowning. Nature, I corrected. Just us and nature. The cabin was beautiful but isolating, a log structure perched on the edge of a black, still lake. There were no neighbors for miles. I parked the car and killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was heavy. We're here, I announced. Let's unpack. I unlocked the front door and ushered them in. The cabin was cold. David went to start a fire while Lisa wandered around looking for a signal. My phone is dead, she complained. Mine too, I said. Isn't it peaceful? I went to the kitchen to start dinner. I had a specific menu planned: steak, red wine, and a very special dessert. As the sun went down, the cabin plunged into darkness, lit only by the fireplace and the candles I had lit. We sat at the rough-hewn wooden table. The wine flowed freely. I made sure their glasses were never empty. I stayed sober, drinking grape juice I had poured into a wine bottle earlier. To family, I toasted, raising my glass. To family, David echoed, his eyes glassy. He was drunk on the prospect of the money. You know, I said, cutting into my steak. I learned something interesting about this cabin. The owner said a couple went missing here in the 80s. They were never found. Lisa laughed nervously. That's creepy, Amara. Why would you tell us that? Because, I said, leaning forward, the candlelight dancing in my eyes. They say the wife found out the husband was having an affair. She brought him here, poisoned his wine, and buried him under the floorboards. David stopped chewing. He looked at his wine glass. He looked at me. That's a dark story, he stammered. It is, I agreed. But don't worry. I didn't poison the wine. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was screaming. I wouldn't need to. Poison is for cowards. I prefer the law. I reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding between the candle and the steak knives. What is this? Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Open it, I commanded. My voice wasn't the voice of the cow anymore. It was the voice of the butcher. David reached out and opened the envelope. He pulled out the first photo. It was the picture of them at the altar in 2015. He froze. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He just stared at it, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Lisa leaned over to look. She let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. He pulled out the next paper. The birth certificate, then the next, the bank transfer records, then the printout of their plan to run to Costa Rica. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw true terror in his eyes. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. There was only the realization that he was a trapped rat. Amara, he whispered. I can explain. Can you? I asked calmly. Can you explain why you married me while you were married to her? Can you explain why you stole my money? Can you explain Noah? We were desperate, Lisa cried, tears streaming down her face instantly, her go-to defense mechanism. We were broke. We needed a way out. We didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. You called me the cow. You lived in my house, ate my food, slept in my bed, and laughed about it. You weren't desperate, Lisa. You were greedy. David stood up, knocking his chair over. Okay, look, Amara, you have to listen. We can fix this. We can pay you back. The inheritance... There is no inheritance, David. I cut him off. Aunt Clara died broke 10 years ago. There is no $2 million. There is no boat. There is no Costa Rica. The realization hit him like a physical blow. What? And the money in the joint account? I continued. Gone. I moved it all 3 days ago. You have nothing. You are stranded in the middle of nowhere with no car keys. I held them up and dropped them down the front of my shirt. No cell service and no money. David's face twisted. The fear was replaced by anger. He looked at the steak knife on the table. He looked at me. He was bigger than me, stronger than me. And now, he was cornered. You think you're smart? He growled, stepping toward me. You think you can just trap us here? Give me the keys, Amara. No, I said, not moving. Give me the keys or I'll take them, he threatened, his voice dropping to a menacing rumble. Lisa stood up too, her eyes hard. Just get them, David. We have to go. They advanced on me, 2 against 1, in a cabin miles from help. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought violence was the final trump card. But they forgot one thing. I was the daughter of a paranoid Marine, and I hadn't come to the woods alone. I glanced at the window behind them. You might want to look outside before you do anything stupid, David. He hesitated. What? Look outside. He turned. Lisa turned. Through the darkness of the window, red and blue lights suddenly erupted, silent and blinding, washing the trees in a chaotic strobe. Not one car, 3. Sheriff's deputies. I didn't just book a cabin, I said, standing up as the pounding on the front door began. I invited the state police. Bigamy is a felony, David. Fraud is a felony. And kidnapping your son across state lines to hide him, that's federal. The door burst open. Police! Hands in the air! I watched as the officers swarmed the room. I watched David get slammed onto the table, his face pressed into the steak he never got to finish. I watched Lisa screaming as they cuffed her. I stood in the corner, sipping my grape juice, watching my marriage end not with a whimper, but with the snap of handcuffs. As they dragged David out, he looked back at me. Why? He screamed. Why did you wait? Why did you bring us here? I looked him dead in the eye. Because, I said softly, I wanted to see the look on your face when you realized the cow was the one holding the slaughter hammer. The silence that follows a siren is the loudest sound in the world. A ringing void that settles over the landscape once the chaos of justice has been dragged away in the back of a squad car. I stood on the porch of that rental cabin for a long time after the taillights disappeared around the bend of the gravel road, shivering not from the cold of the Michigan night, but from the adrenaline crash that hit me like a physical blow. The cabin, once filled with the tension of 3 people playing a deadly game of cat and mouse, was now empty, the half-eaten steaks still sitting on the table, the candles burning down to nubs, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls that had witnessed the confession. I walked back inside, blew out the candles one by one, and picked up the manila envelope of evidence from the table. It felt lighter now, as if the weight of the lies inside had evaporated the moment they were exposed to the air. I didn't clean up. I didn't wash the dishes. I left the scene exactly as it was, a frozen tableau of greed interrupted, and walked out to my car. Driving back down that dark, winding road alone was the first time in 2 years I had felt truly safe. The radio was off, the windows were down, and the only sound was the crunch of tires on dirt and the steady, rhythmic beating of my own heart, which was no longer broken, but fortified, a fortress that had withstood a siege and was now raising its own flag. The legal aftermath was not a swift execution. It was a slow, agonizing dissection of 2 lives built entirely on fraud. Eleanor, my shark of a lawyer, took immense pleasure in peeling back the layers of David and Lisa's operation during the discovery phase of the trial. It turned out I wasn't the first cow, merely the fattest. They had run similar grifts in Ohio and Pennsylvania, though on a smaller scale, short cons involving fake investment opportunities and sob stories about sick relatives. But with me, they had gotten greedy. They had gotten comfortable. They wanted the house, the pension, the long game. The trial was a media sensation in our county, the sister-in-law scandal splashing across local papers with unflattering court sketches of David looking haggard and Lisa looking defiant. I attended every single hearing, sitting in the front row wearing immaculate white suits, a visual counterpoint to their prison orange. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to look at the woman they had mocked and undervalued and realize that I was the one holding the pen that was writing the final chapter of their lives. They tried to sever their cases, turning on each other with the viciousness of starving rats. David claimed Lisa was the mastermind, the seductress who forced him into the scheme. Lisa claimed she was a battered wife coerced by a manipulative sociopath. It was a fascinating, grotesque play, and the jury didn't buy a single line of dialogue. The most heartbreaking casualty of their war was Noah. I couldn't simply walk away from the child who shared the face of the man who ruined me. When the state raided the house in Indiana, they found him living in squalor with Lisa's mother, a woman who was complicit in hiding him and living off the hush money David sent. She was arrested for harboring a fugitive and child endangerment. Noah was placed into emergency foster care. I visited him once, supervised by a social worker. He was small, confused, clutching a dirty stuffed rabbit, asking for his Auntie Amara, a name I didn't know he knew. It broke me. I realized then that while I could destroy David and Lisa, I couldn't save everyone. I wasn't his mother, and I couldn't raise the son of my abusers without seeing their ghosts in his eyes every day. But I could ensure he had a chance. I used a portion of the funds I had secured, my own money that I had protected, to set up a blind trust for his education and therapy, accessible when he turned 18. I hired a private advocate to ensure he was placed with a stable, vetted family in a different state, far away from the toxicity of his bloodline. It was the only act of mercy I had left in me, a final severance of the tie that bound us. I walked away from the foster center that day, leaving the little boy with the dark curls behind, and I cried for the first time in months. I cried for the innocence he lost, and for the innocence I had lost, right along with him. The sentencing hearing was the crescendo. The courtroom was packed. When the judge asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement, I stood up. I didn't need notes. I walked to the podium, looked David in the eye, his charm eroded, his hair thinning, his posture slumped, and then looked at Lisa, who refused to meet my gaze, staring at the table. For 2 years, I began, my voice echoing in the silent room. These two people convinced me that I was crazy for sensing the truth. They weaponized my empathy. They used the sacred bond of family as a Trojan horse to invade my home and rob me of my security. They didn't just steal my money, they stole my reality. They made me doubt my own mind. I paused, taking a breath. But they made a fatal error. They assumed that kindness was weakness. They assumed that because I loved loudly, I would fight softly. Today, I am here to reclaim the narrative. I am not the victim who was duped. I am the witness who testified. I am not the cow. I am the storm. The judge sentenced David to 15 years for fraud, bigamy, and grand larceny. Lisa got 12. As the bailiffs led them away, the chains on their ankles rattling, David looked back one last time. He mouthed the word, "Please." I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched him disappear through the side door, vanishing into the system that would consume the prime years of his life. The divorce was finalized in absentia a month later. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Couldn't walk down the hallway where I had found the water leak. Couldn't cook in the kitchen where she had mocked my eggs. I sold the furniture, the paintings, even the wedding china. I wanted nothing that had touched the era of David. With the money from the house sale and the savings I had rescued, I found myself with a clean slate and a substantial bank account. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had wanted to steal this wealth to run away to Costa Rica, and now I was the one holding the ticket. But I didn't go to Costa Rica. I didn't want to go anywhere they had touched with their fantasies. Instead, I looked at a map of the world and chose the furthest point from my old life I could find. I chose New Zealand. I packed 2 suitcases, leaving the rest of my possessions at Goodwill, and boarded a one-way flight to Auckland. Living on the other side of the world offers a strange, healing perspective. The stars look different. The water spins the other way down the drain. The air smells of salt and green earth. I rented a small cottage near the coast, a place with wide windows and no guest room. I spent my days hiking the cliffs, letting the wind scour the memories from my skin. I didn't date. I didn't look for romance. I learned to be alone without being lonely, to trust the silence of an empty room rather than filling it with the noise of false affection. I started painting again, a hobby David had ridiculed as a waste of time, filling canvases with dark, stormy seas that eventually gave way to sunrises and calm waters. I met people who didn't know my story, who didn't look at me with the pity reserved for the woman whose husband married his sister. To them, I was just Amara, the quiet American artist who made good coffee and watched the ocean with an intensity that suggested she had seen things in the waves no one else could see. 6 months into my new life, I received a letter. It was forwarded from Eleanor. It was from David, sent from the correctional facility. The envelope was cheap, the handwriting shaky. I sat on my porch, looking out at the Tasman Sea, and debated burning it unopened. But curiosity, that old dangerous friend, won out. I tore it open. It was a pathetic missive, pages of excuses, blame-shifting, and half-hearted apologies. He talked about how hard prison was, how he missed the soft sheets, how Lisa had stopped writing to him. He asked if I could send him money for the commissary, claiming he was being targeted by other inmates. "I know you still care," he wrote. "We were good once, Amara, before she ruined it. Help me." I laughed then, a loud, startled sound that frightened a seagull perched on the railing. The audacity of a narcissist is truly a renewable resource. It never runs out. I didn't burn the letter. I folded it into a paper boat. I walked down to the shoreline, where the tide was going out, and I placed the boat in the water. I watched the ink bleed, watched the paper sodden and sink, carrying his words down into the dark, cold crush of the ocean floor. I didn't send money. I didn't write back. His sentence was 15 years. My sentence was freedom, and I intended to serve every single day of it. I learned that intuition isn't a suggestion. It is a survival mechanism honed by thousands of years of evolution. The unease I felt when he hugged her, the nausea when I saw them whispering, that was my biology trying to save me from a predator. I promised myself I would never silence that voice again. If something felt wrong, it was wrong. If a boundary was crossed, I would burn the bridge. I realized that the sister introduced to me wasn't just a lie. She was a mirror showing me my own vulnerabilities, my own desperate need to be loved so badly that I ignored the red flags waving in my face. I forgave the old Amara, the one who cooked the casseroles and lent the money. She was kind, and kindness is not a sin, but she was naive. The new Amara was kind too, but her kindness had gates and guards and a very high wall. A year later, I was walking through a market in Wellington when I saw a man. He was handsome, with dark curls and a charming smile, looking at a painting. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. "It looks like my bank account," he joked, pointing to the abstract art. The exact same line David had used, the exact same charm. My heart stopped for a beat, then restarted with a slow, steady rhythm. I looked at him. I looked at the painting, and I smiled back, not with the eagerness of a woman needing to be chosen, but with the cool assessment of a woman who knows exactly what she is worth. "Then you should probably get a better financial advisor," I said dryly, and walked away. I didn't need another rugged stranger to complete me. I had rebuilt myself from the rubble, brick by brick, and the structure I had created was stormproof. The deception had taken everything from me, my husband, my home, my trust, but it had given me something far more valuable in return. It gave me the truth. It stripped away the illusions I had wrapped around my life and left me standing in the raw, cold light of reality. And in that light I found that I was stronger than I ever imagined. I wasn't the cow. I wasn't the victim. I was the woman who walked into the attic, found the skeletons, and didn't run away screaming. I was the woman who buried the skeletons and planted a garden over the grave.